Hi, I'm Matt Sky. Thanks for watching Sky vs. Sky. I'd like to welcome my guest, Alyona Minkovski, host of the Alyona Show on RT. Alyona, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
And just right off the bat, so what's your experience with RT? You've been with them for a while now. You have obviously kind of a fun, newsy program. You cover different issues that I don't always see covered by the mainstream.
Well, that's the entire point. It has been a great experience. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years, been doing the show for a little over 2 years now, and the entire point of it is to cover the stories that the mainstream media doesn't cover. Our little slug, if you want to put it that way, is that we do the real headlines with none of the mercy, because we don't whitewash anything. We go for it, and people will call me a liberal commentator. Sure, I'm liberal. Absolutely no doubt about that, but I try to not really get in to so much of the partisan tit-tat, which is what you see on the mainstream networks all the time. And we do try to rise above, have a conversation about the subjects that should matter to everybody, the subjects that affect all Americans. That's why I go so big on civil liberties, because these are the cases where we really all have a vested interest in it and shouldn't buy into so many of the distraction techniques, which I think that the mainstream media uses in terms of making it an issue of left versus right. No, it's it's civil rights, it's civil liberties, human rights, whatever you want to call it. And we try to do fun stories that will bring a young audience back to TV too, because let's face it, young people don't really watch TV news.
No, they don't. They've given up. It's just all YouTube.
You're going to go online. You're going to read it. You might be able to watch it online. We have a lot of viewers that watch on YouTube, a lot of viewers that watch on Hulu. And while, I'm not discriminating at all, anybody of any age can and does watch my show, but there's some subjects out there. We went really big on SOPA, on PIPA, on CISPA, some of these techie issues that for people like you and myself, I think we've grown up with the internet. It just seems very, very natural, but I feel like the mainstream media hasn't really caught up on that one yet either.
Do you think it's a reason because like a vested corporate reason, or is it more that they just feel their audience is just not going to get it? It's too techie. We have people who are in their 80s who just don't understand even how to log on to Facebook, forget covering these types of issues?
I think it's a little mix of both. For example, if you want to talk about the debate over SOPA and PIPA, what we saw going on there was that all of the major media companies, were also in support of that piece of legislation.
Right, they were benefiting from that, yeah.
I think the first person that I saw really talk about it was Chris Hayes, who actually does have a great show on MSNBC, and he had the NBC Universal lawyer come on and argue, the point for it versus another activist that was arguing against SOPA and PIPA. And so I think that plays an element. Also, that was one of those things which was really incredible because we saw the Reddit community take part, right? This is a movement that we saw build online first, and only then did some of the tech giants decide to join along too. If you want to talk about Google, if you want to talk about Craigslist and Wikipedia, and then one day they noticed there's this massive online protest going on. We only noticed because Wikipedia, had a blacked out page.
Everyone was doing a blackout day. That was a fantastic moment to see. Now, what are some of the big issues right now that alternative media, other than this one, of course, that you're able to cover that other people can't touch? This is obviously one big example, but is there anything else that you think is pretty pivotal?
I can't even say that it's so much that other people can't touch it. I mean, I definitely think that we do have an element, unfortunately, of non-mainstream thought, ideas that might seem a little more radical. The cable networks definitely shy away from that. But I think that Occupy has been a wonderful example for something where alternative media really has just been rocking it. Alternative media is flourishing in terms of covering the Occupy movement. You have people that have been live tweeting from all across the country, from different Occupy camps. And I think that caught on really well. And that was an exciting moment, if you ask me. But at the same time, it's things that just make sense and that should be obvious. So, for example, I go on a lot about drone strikes, about the Obama administration's policies in that regard. And so yesterday we had the New York
You're not
Times.
a huge Obama fan, right? I mean, you're not a soldier for Obama.
I give him a lot of hell, and I think I give him hell where he deserves it. I voted for Obama. Okay. I'm a Democrat, and I very much am disappointed with certain policies of his. And so I bought into it when he said that we were going to close Guantanamo Bay, that we're going to get torture off of our record. And what does he do instead? Well, we don't capture people anymore, so we don't have to torture them and then deal with those repercussions in court by not bringing them to court and just indefinitely detaining people. But now we just kill people. And he's skirting around the Constitution. He has a kill list, and he decides in his White House, in the Oval Office, who knows, by himself, who he's going to execute, which is a really scary, insane power that the president of the United States, the democratically elected president, isn't supposed to have. And you would think that that's something that everyone wants to talk about. I think it's great that the New York Times finally really looked into, the very complicated mess that that's become. And it is kind of nuanced in terms of the policies and the way that the president has handled it. But I was watching MSNBC last night, all of the big evening shows, the Rachel Maddows of the world, and they were still talking about Mitt Romney and Donald Trump and furtherism.
That is the most boring story to me. Why does Donald Trump find his way into everything? He'll find his way into like this interview. His head like pop in. Hey, he's like that big
because they buy into it though. He's a total, he loves the media. He loves the attention. And they give it to him, and then it just becomes very easy fodder. It's very cheap to do, and it's not really going to affect anybody. It's not going to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right. It doesn't challenge any of the status quo. You just put a big, weird, fuzzy head Donald Trump in there, and he's mildly entertaining, but I don't see him as that charismatic. I don't understand why he's getting this much attention, especially when we're looking at so much joblessness, so many real issues, huge foreign policy decisions that have to be made. And then it's Trump was hanging with Romney, and then they bring up the birther thing again. I mean, it just seems so out of touch. I'm surprised that even average Americans would be interested in tuning into that. Maybe they aren't. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be asked when it comes to that, right? I think that this is why a lot of the cable networks are failing. Sure, Fox News is actually doing really well.
Well, they've cornered their market, right? They know exactly.
They have the higher. Well, what I think that we really have to remember is that a lot of people say that what the media does, it's all for ratings and they just want to keep the audience happy. But the media has not only the ability to influence perceptions around the country, to influence the national discourse, I also think that they kind of have a responsibility to do that. And, we have entire channels that are dedicated to doing entertainment news. I don't need CNN to go on with celebrity gossip every single morning, which is very much what they do. And so I just don't understand why they can't, or why they won't focus more on the issues that matter. And part of it is because perhaps, like we said a second ago, they don't want to disrupt the status quo. It has a lot to do with access. You don't want to upset people in the government because that's where your sources come from. And so you don't want to ruin that relationship if you hurt someone's feelings. And at the same time, playing a soundbite over and over again and bringing in a pundit, that's easy and it's cheap, and that keeps the 24-hour news cycle going.
Right, because, there's no substance, so once you've got that clip, you just play it over and over again. And it's interesting what you're talking about with the entertainment component, because you're right, we do have other venues we can go and get our gossip news. I don't need to see my reporters constantly trying to get it. I feel like everyone wants to outdo Jon Stewart. I feel like that's what it is. It's this collective jealousy of why do you get to do what you do? Maybe Colbert as well. But there are so many reporters. I mean, I think you're pretty funny, so I think you found a nice, healthy balance. And I think Rachel Maddow finds a nice, healthy balance. But there's so many reporters you can tell they're so stiff and so structured, and they're just not funny. And they just desperately wish they could be. They're at like a burning fire that's a horrific scene behind them, and they want to throw in a zinger while they're at it. So
well, I appreciate the compliment. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm very funny, and so as much as we try to emulate the style of Jon Stewart in a certain respect, because we also do mainstream media critique, and so we play these clips, and we're in many respects like you can't help but laugh at what it is that they're doing. But yeah, I wish I had the comedic genius that he does. I wish I had the brilliant comedy writers, and Rachel. Yeah, I respect her a lot. Very funny too. But who doesn't want to have that job, right? Because it seems like so much fun.
You're completely liberated.
They're having more influence than some of the so-called most trusted names in news out there, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert are.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have to admit I'm a little bit of a bigger fan of Colbert, only because I like Jon Stewart's style, but a lot of it I feel like is a clip, and then we see his reaction to the clip, and that is just like half of it's just it's just these odd
the facial expression, yeah.
Right. I don't know if it's always complete political satire. I mean, there are guys like Bill Maher who I love, and he's obviously extremely polarizing, but he's so eloquent and so funny about the issues themselves. I mean, you're laughing because he's framed it in such a way. But of course, Jon Stewart's hilarious. And
well, Stephen Colbert, though, he has the advantage of being able to play a character the entire time, where Jon Stewart is still himself, and so at times he gets very earnest.
That's a great point.
Which I think some people actually turns them off. I have some friends and we get in these battles over who's better. Is it Stewart or Colbert? Because I feel like I have an allegiance to Stewart because he's been around for longer. But Colbert is hilarious, but he doesn't have to deal with some of the sensitivities that are involved in what you say, because we live in this time where not only does the news cycle move very quickly, but it's so inflammatory. You say something and then immediately you have to respond, and Twitter's on fire about it, and it's very easy to piss people off all the time, which I think on one hand you should be doing, right? I think polarizing figures are good figures, especially if you spark a national discussion that should be had. But it's easier when you get to play a character.
I think you're right. I mean, we totally overreact. Everyone's always stepping on eggshells. They're completely paranoid of saying anything because it's going to immediately explode into this reputation, destroyed. You're a racist, you're a bigot, whatever it might be. You can't even make light jokes anymore. We're just constantly, everything's good, right? Everybody agrees on this consensus, this joke was good. And so it's a little bit sad in that sense. And you're right, Jon Stewart is a guy who puts himself out there a lot more. I suppose one thing I'm curious about now, this is a little bit of changing topics. With RT, are you criticized ever? Obviously, we know that there's a financial bias in a lot of U.S. news. There's the idea of selling advertising and keeping it entertaining. Is there a criticism that you take being a part of RT, that it's Russian interest? Now, I've watched the program. I don't see it that way, but I think a lot of people have articulated that viewpoint.
Sure, yeah, of course. There's always criticism to be thrown around, and especially if you look at, there's been a number of pieces out there that have been written about RT, and it's always kind of the same themes that they keep recycling. I can't tell you how many times somebody has used the title or the headline of Pravda on the Potomac, to talk about our bureau in Washington, D.C., and they just keep going. It's kind of low-hanging fruit because, I think if you say that something is a state-funded news network, then it's very easy to immediately point a finger and say, well, then that must be propaganda. Then you have to ask yourself the question as to what is propaganda? Is propaganda where someone is spinning the news and not telling the truth? Are they making facts up? Are they just, going after stories that might have a particular spin on it that might benefit a certain segment of the population, have someone's interest in mind? There's always someone's interest in mind, right? Like you mentioned, the media here in our country, it's a business. And so it's a corporate run media. And so RT definitely does get a lot of critique in that sense. But a lot of the time I feel that the critique is so shallow, and it's so much because people are afraid of this other. For example, when Julian Assange now has a program on RT. And
you were one of the first to interview him, right? I mean, you were interviewing him before a lot of the others were, or maybe even
that's
before.
true. We interviewed him, in April, the day that they released that collateral murder video, because they happened to do it at the National Press Club, which is right around the corner from our office, and nobody was paying attention yet to WikiLeaks, to Julian Assange, and so it was really cool to grab him, have him come in the studio. What I would give.
He still had that long white hair and that leather jacket. He's always switching his style. He's so mysterious. He's always changing how he looks. But
he's very mysterious. The group that he came with, they came in and they were whisked out really quickly. It's almost as if they were never there. But man, what I would like to do now, 2 years later, if I had another chance to interview him, and the amount of questions that I would have. But let me just finish my point really quickly. Is so that he had the leader of Hezbollah. People were just outraged. They couldn't believe it. How dare you interview someone like this? And Julian Assange isn't even a journalist. Well, guess what? You might not like what the guy has to say, but you can't deny that this is somebody who has influence around the world. Therefore, he is a newsworthy person. And so, if...
you're not only going to interview newsworthy people. I mean, you're going to not only interview people you agree with, they have to be newsworthy. So they might...
Exactly. And so if no other journalists are going to do it, and I don't even think that you have to give the critique that Julian Assange shouldn't be able to do it because he isn't a journalist. But anyway, it's always floating around out there. I can only, answer and speak for the material that I put out there, for what I say, for what I do. And I'm very proud of the work that I do and what we put on the show. And I know that my whole team feels the exact same way because we're really passionate about the subjects that we cover, and and our guests, our viewers. I can't tell you what a great response we get when people thank us for covering the stories that we do.
I think what's great is people just living in the information age, being able to get sources of information from many different sources, and then being able to decipher and decide what they believe, so that it's not, it used to be just, you have like the 4 or 5 major networks and that's it. They tell you everything and you just hope that they're right. Whereas now we have this incredible information revolution. Is there a certain hypocrisy in some ways, though, with RT, in that, here in the U.S., of course, we criticize the elections in Russia so often, we criticize the democratic process. Is there hypocrisy for RT to criticize the democratic process in the U.S.? That's a common argument I hear.
I don't think so. I don't feel like a hypocrite because I am an American. I've lived here since I was born in Moscow, but I moved to the United States when I was 4 years old. I've grown up here. I've gone to school here all my life. My parents divorced, and so my stepmother, that whole side of the family, they're American. So this is the country that I grew up in. These are the ideals that I believe in. This is the history that I know, and that I guess you could say that I really connect with the most, because this is my home. And so I don't feel like a hypocrite at all that I'm talking about what's going on in the United States, because that's what affects me, and that's what affects my life every day, and that's what I care about, and that's what what I'm trying to bring out to the audience too.
And how free is your editorial control? Are you tightly regulated, or you basically...
No, we have a small team. There's 6 of us. We come in every morning. We patrol the internet, look for what it is that we think it's interesting that day, what we have to cover. We send out an email to each other with all the links that we thought were interesting. We sit in our meeting and we come up with the content, and it is what it is. We have control.
And so I guess, what do you see as some of the big issues coming up in 2012 and 2013? What are the real issues? Because I think, there are sort of these, like we were talking about, the Donald Trump thing. I'm sure Donald Trump will probably be Time Magazine's Person of the Year or something, but what do you think are the big issues we should be looking out for right now?
Well, I think we can't deny the fact that the economy is still going to be a very important issue, and that's not something that people are ignoring, but you still have to talk about this idea of inequality, which is what the Occupy movement really tried to bring up. And then suddenly you kind of saw the shift even from the president, and now you see lawmakers using the 99% versus 1% kind of rhetoric.
Part of the,
which is actually it's a big achievement. That's a big victory for the Occupy movement. But the problem isn't going away, right? We still see all of the wealth going to the top. We still see the gap only becoming even larger. We see only more people falling into poverty. And so this country is fundamentally changing, because what it used to be about was this growing middle class, that everybody could achieve this American dream. That's completely fallen apart at this moment. We have to reevaluate what the American dream really means. It used to be you go to college, you get married, you buy a house, all that good stuff. These days, should anybody buy a house anymore? I don't know. After that housing bubble, suddenly it seems like it makes more sense to rent. Now a lot of people are asking whether it makes sense for you to pay $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 a year for a college education if you're going to be saddled with that debt for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so I think that these are really big fundamental questions that people have to ask themselves, and things that are going to affect the country. And a lot of that has to do with where the government is choosing to devote its resources to. Are we going to invest in more education? Are we going to invest in more research? Or are we going to let this war on terror be this perpetual, growing, expanding monster that it is, where the military-industrial complex, really the defense contractors, they have a sweet deal out of this, because
they're getting paid
even
more
under the
than the
Obama
soldiers,
administration, the defense budget keeps growing. Republicans don't want to cut it at all. They're willing to cut out all the social programs because of it. And so I just think that those are big questions. Those are big issues that are really going to redefine what it is to be an American and to believe in this kind of American dream.
Are you optimistic that we'll see these positive changes and move toward an improved, or go back to the American? I think people like to nostalgically think of what the American dream was, and they forget that we've always had difficulties and challenges. But do you think we're going to find our way, I guess, so to speak?
Oh man,
like
I
corny,
hope
but...
so. And I don't mean to make it sound. There is a lot of nostalgia going on around out there, and you're right. And change is good. I don't think that we should ever push against progress. No, change is good. Progress is good. Reevaluating is totally fine. But as long as we actually have that national conversation, but the more that, the more control is based in the hands of fewer people, the more power that they have. And when the voices of the majority of the masses are then consistently drowned out. And this is where I really do think that, this whole conversation that we're having about a corporate controlled mainstream media that is this weird self-serving bubble. It's, it's based in Washington, D.C., and it's based in New York, and it's as if the rest of the country doesn't even exist. And it's all about who's saying what in this major city today. And
except for like the random Joe the plumber. He's the guy who represents the rest of us, right?
Whatever it is that's out there. And so that part kind of scares me, but that's why the internet is a great thing, right? That's why we see alternative media flourishing. You have more people that are able to access more ideas. You just have to do a little bit more digging for them. So, of course, I always like to be hopeful. I don't want to be down. I don't want to be a pessimist.
Sure.
But part of what you have to do in order to have hope for that is you got, if you're going to own the future, then you have to own what's going on right now. And you can't just close your eyes to it. You can't be blind to it. And you have to speak out. You have to get angry. I don't care if I'm a Democrat and Obama's a Democrat and Mitt Romney's going to be worse. I still care, and I'm going to criticize the president in the areas where I think that he's failing, where he's breaking promises, and going against what he said he was going to do. How
do you feel about Romney? What if he won? Would that be an utter disaster beyond explanation?
I mean, part of me has just no reaction to Romney. I'd feel so blah about it.
He doesn't feel, I know, it is weird. He's got this, maybe he could just win by kind of just floating his way in. He doesn't feel like he has a strong
in that
footprint.
sense, there's that robot critique of him, which is the guy has no personality whatsoever.
He's learning, though. He's learning how to be human gradually. He's watching how we act, and he's starting to figure it out.
But it's hard to get him to elicit any emotion, because of that. But yeah, when it comes to his tax policy, I definitely fundamentally disagree with it. When it comes to, you look at the budget that he's proposing, he wants to double defense spending in the meantime. He wants to privatize education. I just don't agree with all that. But I wonder sometimes if, let's say that Mitt Romney did get elected, would Republicans still be as radical as they are right now? That a lot of the time when the country is so divided,
maybe it would moderate things out a little more.
Yeah, but because there's so much hate for the president right now, that's why Congress is at this complete standstill. That's why Republicans refuse to budge on anything and why nothing is getting passed. And so you kind of have to wonder for a second if things would even out. Not that I want that to happen, but I think that it's
but it's a great point. I mean, the gridlock is certainly what I think holds us back in so many ways. So I guess, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap up in a moment here. I wish we could stay longer. And any final pointers or things you'd recommend viewers to do to be more informed?
Man, I guess, you have to...
It's like a guidebook they should buy?
Yourselves, unfortunately. That's how it is with our media environment today. Like you said it earlier, you can't just go to one news source and expect that you're going to get all your information there. You have to be hungry for it. You have to more work, a little more digging. But that's also the great thing with having more sources of news out there online, more international sources of news, is that you can get so many different perspectives and then come to your own conclusion, right? Don't let Fox News tell you what to think every day of your life. And so that's all I can really tell people, I guess, is think for yourselves, search for yourselves, and don't conform. Don't let other people tell you what to think, but really find that good material that's out there.
Let us tell you what to think. I'm teasing.
No, I'm saying that there are plenty of different places you should look, but the more you know, the more informed of an opinion you can make.
Okay, well, this has been Sky versus Sky. I'm Matt Sky. I'd like to thank my guest, Alyona Minkovski of the Alyona Show on RT. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and anytime. So check us out on the web, www.skyversussky.com.